We're going back to some of my earliest years in gaming, folks. Time for a bizarre one. Hello everyone and welcome to Let's Play Toejam Earl in Panic on Funkotron. Let's get the intro out of the way. Somewhere in outer space... they're out here somewhere. Down on the peaceful planet of Funkotron. We interrupt this program to bring you terrible news. Funkotron has been invaded by Earthlings. These strange aliens are scaring the local inhabitants. Making an awful mess. And generally being a nuisance. No one knows exactly how they got here. But it is believed that they clung to the outside of a returning spaceship. Owned by two teenage Funkotronians named... Toejam and Earl. We are in some serious hot water, Earl. Uh-huh. So here's the plan. We find all the Earthlings. Trap them with our trap-o-matic jars. And ship them back to Earth. Presto, no more problem. Yeah, no more problem. And from here, we're taken into our main menu. We can start the game outright, input a password, which you get after every second level, so before levels 3 and 5, so on and so forth. There's a sound test, you can configure your controls or change the text speed as well. Little Kid Mode is interesting, though. Little Kid Mode makes Toejam and or Earl completely immortal, but you can't actively finish the game all the way. This game technically has about 17 levels. Little Kid Mode finishes after level 5. Next up is our character select. You can either play as just Toejam or just Earl. I'm going to be playing as just Toejam myself. But Toejam and Earl are the default, similarly to being Sonic and Tails in Sonic 2 as well as Sonic 3. With that said, if you're playing by yourself, you need to select either just Toejam or just Earl. Choosing both is by default a two-player mode. It's not like choosing Sonic and Tails as a duo in Sonic 2 or Sonic 3, where the first player controller controls Sonic, but you don't need to have a second player pick up the other controller to control Tails. If you choose both, the camera scrolling is actively locked to both, so if you're just playing by yourself, you'll get to the edge of the first screen and not be able to move anymore. So we already know the general vibe of what we're trying to do here via the intro. We're trying to capture all the Earthlings that have made it onto Planet Funkotron here, but the other name of the game for Toejam and Earl Panic on Funkotron is Searching. Anytime throughout the stage, if you see a tree or a bush behind you, 9 times out of 10, you can hold up to investigate it, and sometimes an Earthling will pop out you need to capture. Other times, a tire or trash can will fall out. They'll try to damage you, or you'll get a present that'll either be points or items that can help you along the way. There are times where enemies will also just jump out of those types of things by themselves, depending on what you do. And that can blindside you at some times, but they at least have a tool around this, namely, Toejam and Earl have access to 3 distinct sort of sub-weapons that you access by pausing the game, then pressing either the A, B, or C buttons on the Genesis. Pressing the start and then the A button triggers a funk scan that'll show things in a very psychedelic fashion, but also highlight what's within certain bushes and the like, be it a present, a tire, or a trash can, or the Earthlings silhouette outright. Speaking of Earthlings, we're coming up on our first one. This is going to be a baseball kid. They walk back and forth, occasionally throwing their baseballs directly at you. Throw your jars until they fall into the form, and then just collect them for points, and then you're good to move on. But we're actively not done yet here, because we also have another Earthling here that is a little girl. She just runs back and forth and kicks you in the shins. You always have a good way to figure out where Earthlings are, by the way, even on top of the funk scan. Namely, you might notice that arrow on the bottom right side of the screen. That is a radar that's pointing you towards the next nearest human. As you approach it, it will slowly change its direction to highlight where it is even more closely, but when it's glowing red, you're in the general vicinity. Once you've collected all Earthlings within a given level, that radar will change to a green arrow pointing you to the general direction you need to go to reach the end of the stage. At this point, though, I might as well talk about the general controls. The main face buttons all actively have a distinct function in this game. One's a jump button, which you can jump in any direction, but you can also hold down before jumping to trigger a super jump that goes a bit higher. One button will throw jars, which you can throw jars either horizontally, directly upwards in a lob that'll slowly come back down in an arc, or you can place them down on the ground to sort of function as grenades, but I seldom use this. The thing to note about your horizontal jar throw is that Toejam and Earl both aim directly at the nearest Earthling they can capture with it, even if they're almost directly above or below you, as long as there's a straight shot that it can go to. So in most cases, that's probably going to be your best method to take care of enemies. But there is one other that the game doesn't directly tell you, but is highlighted pretty well in the manual as the ultra cool technique, namely, you can also throw jars while jumping in midair. But if you do the grenade drop while in midair, it doesn't act as a grenade, it acts as a normal jar throw, but you can spam the ever-living shit out of it. So the best way to capture most enemies in this game is to jump directly above them and then just carpet bomb them with jars. There's 2 or 3 distinct Earthling varieties that is actively the most effective way to capture with, too. At this point, we've captured all the Earthlings in level 1, and we're being pointed towards the right to go exit the level, but there's one other thing I want to showcase in this level along the way. Well, 2 actually. For one thing, if you see a parking meter in a given level, you can put one of your coins that are shown on the bottom left in there to do some effect. Sometimes it'll cause an item to spawn in, sometimes it'll cause a door to open up. Other times it'll bring you into something called the Hyperfunk Zone like this. This is this game's bonus level. You need to phase in and out of reality using the funk transformation I'm doing back and forth to get to the end of the screen in a certain time period. Along the way, there are presents you can pick up for various items in the game, be it points outright, some funk for the bottom left, coins or the like. But there's also time meters to extend your time in one of these, as well as portals that take you out. For the first couple of levels, I intentionally actively mess up at the very end of the first screen of the Hyperfunk Zone just to get my supplies higher. Because there are 3 levels to every Hyperfunk Zone. A blue floor level, a green floor level, and a red floor level. By completing every level of each of the 3 distinct Hyperzone maps, I think 3 times, we're going to unlock a notable bonus. But I, again, don't do that for a couple of levels because I want to get my stocks up, but also I want to showcase how the game tries to fight back along the way to an extent. There's also points in the levels where you're going to be swimming decently frequently. Basically, every level has at least one small section like this, but they're mostly optional for points under funk and the like. Toejam and Earl do have a limited air meter, and they do die instantly upon that being reduced to 0, hence why there's not even a health bar on screen in the swimming sections. But more often than not, you're going to be pretty fine in the swimming sections because they'll place purple, smooth pufferfish all over the place. Touching one of those will restore your air meter to max. So as for the last thing we want to do in this level, you might have noticed I went through the wall a moment ago. That's because this game has several hidden passageways and walls you just kind of need to feel out to find. By pressing the button in there, that has activated a hidden door we can enter all the way back at the start of the stage. By going through that door, you gain access to one of this game's level selects. Sort of. This is closer to a warp zone from the original Super Mario Bros. In that each of these doors will take you to a later level. The first, second, and third doors will take you to levels 3, 4, and 5, respectively. And if you're playing Little Kid mode, that's a quick way to actively go beat the game. I've unfortunately locked myself into this warp zone, so I'm going to enter level 5 briefly, and then just cut back to a second run I did of the first level to actually finish it properly. Along the way, though, we're going to run into this game's main minigame variant, a groove pad. Hey, TJ. What's up, Bebo? Put a coin in the coin meter if you want to jam out. So, the way this minigame works is that after dancing for a moment, the character you're interacting with will give you a pattern of boom, shakas, and claps. These respond to the B, A, and C buttons on the Genesis controller, respectively. The closer you get to matching the boom, shakas, and claps in the order you're given, the more points you're given, or at least a better reward you're given. Sometimes it's just points outright, sometimes it's funk for your funk meter down in the bottom left. It just depends on the exact instance of the minigame you're doing. I'm also horrific at this memorization for some reason. Thankfully, there are more than enough ways to get points or funk for the bottom left of the screen right there in the game anyway, because if this was the main way to get it, I would frankly be hosed. No one can shake it like you, TJ. Worth noting, I'm going to be speeding up all future instances of this minigame in post, more just for the sake of time, because not for nothing, this game's levels can get pretty chunky. And I think there's at least one part in this LP that gets towards 30 minutes. I didn't want that to be a regular thing. At the end of every level is an earth pod you throw the humans into, as well as the launch pad. Aye, ready to go to the next level? Yep. Did you get all the Earthlings here? Yep, sure did. Okay, get ready. Ready. And thus we are launched into the sky and into our second level. These are actively where you're going to eventually get passwords after every second level, like it before level 3, 5, 7, all that jazz, like I said earlier. But you want to really write those passwords down because they are pretty long and clunky. Worth noting, level 1 has 4 Earthlings, level 2 here has 11. Really quickly in this level, though, we're introduced to one of my 3 least favorite enemy types in the game, the tourists. There's a man and a woman variant of them. The man has slightly more HP, I think it's like 6 hits according to the manual, according to the woman's 4. The thing is about them, they will very quickly, without much warning, go say cheese and flash their camera flash. That will not only do damage to you, but it stuns you for a few seconds. You can hold down on the D-pad to shield your eyes from it, but there is so little warning to when they actively go off with that attack that it's pretty much useless in my eyes. Out of my 3 least favorite enemies in the game, they're probably the most annoying one to get hit by, but they're definitely the least damaging of the 3 at large. Here we got one of this game's secret spots. They're just outright secrets that contain either points for you to get, healing items for you to grab, which are like burgers and cakes, the occasional ice cream cone. It really just depends on the one there are. I'm not showcasing these all off in the game because, frankly, not for nothing. If you look at a map of this game's levels, this game has an absurd amount of secrets hidden in any given level, and I was more focused on trying to just finish the game because this game is decently long, like I said earlier. You look at this game and you think, okay, it might be like 8 levels long, done in maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours. So this game's like 4.5 to 5 hours long, depending on what you're doing. Also, because we just saw it happen, most future instances of the hyperfunk zones are also going to be sped up because when you're in there, you can be in there for like 2.5 minutes, depending on what's going on and how well you're doing. And I just didn't want to showcase all that and make the parts be 30 minutes long consistently, like I said earlier. So, as for my history with this game, Panic on Funkotron has been one of those games that was just always around me. Because growing up, I've mentioned before, my brother and my dad had the NES, the Super Nintendo, the N64, the PS1, and the Genesis. Panic on Funkotron was just one of those Genesis games my brother had. So it's just one of those games that I played at an early age and just never really questioned the existence of. And not for nothing, for a couple of years growing up, I didn't know this is actively a sequel. The original Toejam Earl, as well as the most recent game in the series that came out in the mid-2010s, which is like the 4th entry, I think, are top-down, slightly procedurally generated exploration games where you're trying to just find your ship parts through levels and avoid the humans that came with us into this game. But frankly, I'm probably never going to do an LP of those 2 specific entries because I just don't really find them gripping and I don't really have any nostalgia for them. I might do the 3rd game at some point. That was, I think, on the original Xbox, but that's not exactly a great game. This is the only Toejam Earl game I'm truly attached to in any regard. And it's not that, at least, the top-down games are bad, by the way. It's just that they're not games I particularly find fun to play or have attachment to. Procedurally generated adjacent games I've never been super into as it is. Also, a bit of a weird thing about this game's water controls. Toejam Earl actively can't jump out of the water natively. Instead, as long as the ground is within a certain height limit near the surface of the water, Toejam Earl will automatically jump out of it. But even then, the game's kind of inconsistent about that. That hallelujah, by the way, was me getting 10,000 points and thus getting a 1-up. Right there was one of my other least favorite Earthlings in the game, the construction worker. They're using their jackhammer just to go along the floor at all times, but when you're close to them, just being on the ground will keep you stunned and damaged. In fact, Toejam Earl kind of go, as they're being shaken, period. Each individual instance of the damage that they deal isn't too high, but it's very easy to get stun locked by them alongside other enemies, let alone if there's 2 of them in the same spot. So they're an enemy you really want to use the ultra cool technique where you just kind of carpet bomb with jars to avoid damage as best you can. But that said, there's still nothing compared to my actual least favorite enemy in the game. But my least favorite enemy in the game is also because they're just annoying to catch, period. Sometimes in levels there's underground areas like this, by the way, and you can actively be lit on fire by the fires here and you're kind of forced into running around. But that seldom comes up in a way that's really annoying. So earlier in the part, I brought up the Funk scan, which you use by pressing Start, then A. I still haven't talked about the other 2 sub-weapons Toejam and Earl have access to. They're on the bottom right of the screen, the Panic button and the Funk vacuum. Those are limited in quantity. They can be easily found in hyperfunk zones, but unless you're looking for them in every single level, you want to use those when you actively want and need to use them. When you use the panic button, Toejam Earl will run back and forth frantically, throwing jars every which way. But they're also completely immune to damage while they're using it. There's one specific enemy type I love to use those on, but if you're ever in a tight quarter situation with multiple enemies, it's a very handy tool. The Funk Vacuum is closer to being a screen nuke. Any enemies within your general vicinity will be sucked into it automatically and just be immediately jarred. With that said, they are much rarer to find. Use them both, but make sure you use them smartly. Also, a moment ago, we saw one of my other least favorite enemies in the game. I guess it's my fourth least favorite. The Insane Fairy. The way she works is that she gets on top of your general vicinity and drops what looks to be shit on you, frankly. And when that happens, Toejam Earl will just start laughing uncontrollably for a few seconds, leaving you open to other damage. You cannot control yourself while that's happening. That's annoying on its own, but they're also one of the only enemies in the game that has an outright dodge for your jars. They'll do a loop-to-loop and be able to just phase through any jars. Supposedly they can't dodge jars that are just lobbed straight up at them, but I swear that's not even exactly true. But with that, I'm gonna need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 2 we're moving into level 3. See you guys then.